beauty. So just give us a few minutes, I think we'll get started. You know, if you haven't had already, please try the Palestinian cake that Ibrahim from Cafe Soraya has donated. He also made the tea. And yeah, we'll get started in just a few minutes. And do let me know if the cakes run out, we have more. Joining. My name is Shakar Efrati. I'm an organizer here in Eugene. I have a lot of thanks to give. I wanted to start with that. I want to, of course, first of all, thank the artists, the Tatreez artists. I wanted to thank SJP. I wanted to thank the Islamic Center of Eugene. I want to also thank JVP, Eugene, PSL, and the Green Party. Those are some of the organizers. And just a quick story. Oh, it must have been 6 months ago now when I was having a conversation with some comrades about an exhibit going on in Roseburg about the Holocaust. And I thought, well, why don't we do something lovely about Palestine? And I approached the library with that idea, really expecting, you know, not much appreciation or even a response, and they were extremely welcoming. And then started, you know, I had the idea first. I told them I had an exhibit, and they believed me. And then I put together the exhibit after the fact. But it somehow has, you know, come together really, really beautifully. And so we obviously really hope to raise awareness for Palestine, for the Palestinian cause, for Palestinian artistry. And that's our hope today. So I don't have much more than that to say. I wanted to introduce Michelle Shehadeh. First of all, let me just take out a quick note here. Michelle Shehadeh is a prominent Palestinian writer and activist based in the United States, known for his prolific and diverse contributions in both Arabic and English. His articles and works have been featured in renowned publications such as the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, San Francisco Chronicle, the Boston Globe, Al Adab, and Ray El Yum magazines. Shehadeh previously served as the executive director of the Arab Film Festival in San Francisco and as the West Coast executive director of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, ADC. He gained international recognition for his involvement in the landmark, the Los Angeles 8 case, a legal and political battle in which he and his colleagues were accused of terrorism due to their advocacy for the Palestinian cause. The case, which lasted over 2 decades in court, became a symbol of the struggle for justice and freedom of expression. Shahade holds a bachelor's degree in journalism and a master's in public administration from California State University, Long Beach. Throughout his career, he has skillfully combined literary creativity, institutional leadership, and advocacy to champion the Palestinian cause and amplify its voice on the global stage. And personally, my relation with Michelle Shahade, I'll just say rather quickly, has been nothing but the most cordial, welcoming, and friendly, and very much like an uncle. You know, during this whole process, he has continually encouraged me to not give up and not get disheartened. And I'm forever grateful for him. So please welcome Michelle Shahade.
Sorry, I was unmuted. But anyway, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I also want to express my deep appreciation to the organizing committee and in particular to Sakar, who invited me here to speak and engage in this critical conversation. Of course, when you want to talk about Palestine, we're not going to speak in sound bites. We already have too much of that courtesy of US corporate media. We are being suffocated by their disinformation, narratives stripped of historical, political, and economic context. These three dimensions are essential to understanding the truth. And the truth is this: Palestine is the last active case of direct colonialism in the modern world. And for the sake of time, I will try to be as succinct and focused as I can. But before diving into the heart of this topic, allow me to share why I speak not just with knowledge, but from lived experience. You know, being Palestinian should be credential enough. But in the West, especially in the US, it often makes you a target. And being politically active adds yet another layer of risk: surveillance, silencing, and repression. I came to the US in the mid 1970s at 19 to pursue higher education. I had just lived under Israeli military occupation from 1967 to 1974. Like many Palestinian youths, I experienced checkpoints, curfews, detentions, and beatings. I am grateful I survived. Many others did not. When I arrived in the US, I believed I had reached a country that protected free speech. I became active in student movements against apartheid in South Africa, US intervention in Central America, for healthcare, LGBTQ rights, and immigrant justice. Every cause of justice where I felt I could contribute. But the issue closest to my heart was and remains Palestine. In 1987, due to our Palestine advocacy, 7 of my comrades and I were arrested. We spent 23 days in maximum security prison. The government accused us of supporting terrorism and sought our deportation. We were never charged with any crime. We were organizers, speakers, students, and writers. But we were Palestinians. We fought back. We defended not only ourselves, but the broader civil rights, human rights, immigrant rights, and Arab American rights. The case dragged on for 20 years. we faced the most powerful government on earth, backed by limitless resources. And yet, we won. We were exonerated. Our case became one of the most significant civil liberties battles in the US. It is now taught in law schools. My personal citizenship journey took 40 years, from green card in 1975 to naturalization in 2015. So when I see today's student being harassed, suspended, or arrested for supporting Palestinian rights, I feel a deep sense of déjà vu. But something is different now. There is a shift. Public awareness is growing. People are seeing through the lies that what is speech is about. This speech is about that. Let me say something about the role of US media. Corporate media outlets here function not as watchdogs on the government as they claim, or seekers of truth as they lie and as they should, but as echo chambers of Israeli military talking points. They amplify unverified claims, ignore Palestinian voices, and erase context. This isn't journalism, it is propaganda. Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi minister of propaganda, once said, and I quote, "If you tell a big lie enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually believe it." The US media has taken this lesson to heart. Now, let us explore some myths that sustain the Zionist project and shape Western opinion. First, the old will die and the young will forget. This statement encapsulates Zionist wishful thinking, that Palestinian memory would fade over time. But the opposite has happened. Our youth are leading, our elders are resisting, our people are rising. We chant generation after generation until total liberation. Another myth: Zionism is Judaism. This conflation is dangerous. Zionism is a political ideology rooted in European colonialism. Judaism is a religion rooted in the Middle East, just like Christianity, both of which were later hijacked by the West and westernized. Not all Jews are Zionists, and not all Zionists are Jews. In fact, there are more American Zionists than there are Jews. Many Jews are proudly anti-Zionist. Today, we hear more and more Jewish voices saying Zionism does not represent Judaism and not in our name. Another myth: anti-Semitism is any criticism of Israel. This is false. Anti-Semitism is real and must be condemned, but using the accusation for anti-Semitism to silence a criticism of Israel dilutes the term and endangers Jews. The true threat to Jewish safety comes from white supremacists and apocalyptic Christian Zionists, not from Palestinian solidarity activists. Zionism is not colonialism. That's another repeated myth. Zionism is the definition of settler colonialism. It was launched in 1897 in Switzerland, in Basel, Switzerland, with a clear goal: to build a European Jewish state in Palestine by removing its indigenous inhabitants. It modeled itself on the colonization of the Americas, Australia, and South Africa. Another myth is that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. We keep hearing that over and over again. Democracy for some is not democracy. Israel maintains one legal system for Jews and another for Palestinians. Palestinians in the West Bank live under military occupation, and within the territories colonized in 1948, Palestinian citizens are treated as second class. As the legendary South African anti-apartheid Bishop Desmond Tutu once said, Israel's system of apartheid is worse than what South Africa experienced. Another myth. Israel has the right to self-defense. How many times did you hear that the last 2 years? From what? Defend themselves from what? From the people it colonizes and displaces? This is a reversal of reality. The colonized have the right to resist. That is enshrined in international law and basic moral reasoning. Another myth that, to recognize it, you have to follow the International Criminal Court, ICC, and how it proves the double standard of how the Palestinians are looked upon. When the ICC indicted Putin, the US cheered. But when it looked into Israeli war crimes, US lawmakers threatened the courts, its prosecutor, and even his family, as he said. They said to him, "You have been warned. That's not law, that's intimidation." On the opposite side, let us look at the long arc of Palestinian resistance to the colonization of their country. Palestinian resistance did not begin on October 7th, 2023. It did not begin with Hamas or with Gaza. It began over a century ago with the establishment of the Zionist movement in 1897 in Switzerland, in their conference in Basel, Switzerland, which explicitly targeted Palestine for colonization. By the 1920s and 1930s, Palestinians were resisting both British colonial rule and the growing Zionist settler presence. In 1936 to 1939, the Great Palestinian Revolt was a nationwide uprising. It's worth studying that because it will explain how much the Palestinians have resisted and in the same time suffered. The British crushed it with brutal force, using Zionist militias as collaborators. They killed thousands, exiled leaders, and disarmed the population, all while arming Jewish settlers. Then came the seismic event of 1948, the Nakba, the catastrophe, whose anniversary was commemorated just yesterday. During that fateful period, over 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly expelled, and more than 500 towns and villages were destroyed and erased. Zionist militias carried out massacres and acts of ethnic cleansing. Yet even in exile, Palestinians did not disappear. They organized, they resisted, and the refugee camps became enduring centers of defiance, resilience, and unwavering hope for return. In the 1960s, the PLO emerged, carrying the voices of the dispossessed. It built schools, hospitals, and cultural institutions. It demanded a homeland, not revenge. Its message was simple: we exist. In 1987, the first Intifada broke out. It was a mass uprising, stones against tanks. It was led by youth, women, workers, and teachers. I was arrested that same year here in the US for organizing to support the Intifada and support Palestine. In the year 2000, the second Intifada erupted after years of failed negotiations, broken promises, and unrelenting Israeli settlement expansion. It was more brutal, more desperate, but it powerfully reaffirmed a central truth of the Palestinian struggle. We will not disappear. Today, Gaza is the epicenter of resistance. It is home to 2 million people, most of them refugees from the 1948 Nakba. For 17 years, Israel has enforced a total blockade on food, medicine, fuel, even children's toys. It has bombed hospitals, schools, and refugee camps. Entire families have been erased. And yet, Gaza does not surrender. It stands despite death, pain, starvation, and destruction. Gaza's steadfastness is nothing short of a miracle. Its resilience is legendary. And now something extraordinary is happening. The spirit of resistance has crossed oceans. It is rising in the heart of the empire, in the universities, in the labor unions, in the streets. Students at Columbia, UCLA, Harvard, Berkeley, and the University of Oregon, right here in Eugene, have built encampments. I had the opportunity to visit the Eugene encampment and speak with the students there. They were extraordinary. Principled, informed, and unwavering. And they are not alone. Thousands more have joined them in encampments across the country. They have faced arrests, suspensions, intimidation, and smear campaigns, yet they remain defiant. Their chants echo across campuses, from the river to the sea. Free, free Palestine, shut it down. And they are not alone. Black liberation organizers, indigenous land defenders, Jewish anti-Zionist labor unions all have joined this cause, not out of charity, but out of shared commitment. This is joined liberation. This is not a passing protest. It is a movement. It is tearing down myths and building new political imaginations. That's why the crackdown is so fierce, because once the world understands Palestine, it begins to understand empire. And once empire is understood, it begins to fall. Palestine is not just a place. It is a question, a wound, a test of conscience. To stand with Palestine is not to choose sides. It is to choose a truth over lies, justice over convenience, and humanity over silence. So let me end with this. The Zionist myth once said, the old will die and the young will forget. But our elders are still here, and our youth remember. From the stones of Hebron to the halls of Harvard, from the rubble of Gaza to the rallies of Brooklyn, from the refugee camps in Lebanon to the unions of Detroit, we carry one message. We will not forget. We will not surrender. We will return. From the river to the sea is not just a slogan. It is a vision of liberation for all. Palestine is not alone. Gaza is not alone. And this movement, fierce, loving, unstoppable, is rising. Thank you all for listening.
Now, yeah, we're gonna, very quickly, I survived Zionism too, in some ways. I grew up in Israel. Um, to Zionist parents, Zionist grandparents, uncles. Um, and we're Holocaust survivors. And I heard a lot of never again. And I took that to heart. And I didn't stop taking it to heart. And we'll take that with me, carrying on. So, moving right along, I wanted to just let you all know a few things. First of all, I would love it if you all take a moment to enjoy or witness the beautiful art that Palestinian children here on this wall have put together. We've attempted to share with you all. I will say that we did share that on the second floor, and that was taken down. It was deemed too political. So there is that, and of course, we live in this paradigm, right? Also, we have here lots of books that you can peruse, and these are thobes that we're about to be talking about. And so just encouraging you to feel free to move around and I don't want to see any desserts left over. Saying we can't have that. So Fia is our next speaker, and she's going to be heading the talk on the language of Palestinian Thobes. Welcome, Fia.
My name is Pia. Thank you so much for that introduction and for facilitating this, Shakar. It's been honestly wonderful to work with everybody in this room and on the Zoom call. So I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much for that amazing introduction speech, Michelle. That was beautiful and exactly the tone was set. So yeah, just wanted to speak to the room. We have a lot of artifacts going on, obviously. If you wanna just take some time to look around with me, we have Palestinian thobes done in hand-done Tatreez, which is the Arabic word for embroidery or cross-stitch embroidery, but it is also known as the falahi stitch, which is a traditional Palestinian embroidery that goes back 3,000 years to the Canaanite era. So we can see the multitude of different dresses that we have around the room that we'll begin to talk about later on in this panel. But I would first like to talk with some of the artists that we have that are going to be speaking on contemporary Tatreez and the work that they've done that we have upstairs that you guys should all come back after the panel throughout the month and come and see. So I am so grateful for Tala and Trisha to be here today, as well as Audrey. Audrey, do you want to come up here? So we've got two artists on Zoom and one artist in person. So we would really like to give them a warm welcome. If everyone can give them a round of applause. It was truly such an honor to work with all of these artists. I'm so lucky that I am now able to say that I know them very well and being able to witness their art in person. They are extraordinarily talented, so it is an honor to have them here today. As well as Audrey, who is a very, very close friend, and actually is probably who I owe the most to the inception of me getting into Tatreez and really learning about my cultural and heritage, or my heritage and my connection to it. So have them to thank for that as well. But yeah, I would like to start with some questions for you guys. Obviously, everyone here is here to talk about the language of Tatreez, how it is communicative. So I was wondering if you guys could each speak to, more than the technicality of, it is embroidery. What does Tatreez mean to you as far as it being a language and communicating something other than words? If you want to start with someone on Zoom, maybe?
I think you should call someone by
Oh,
name.
yeah. Oh, I can do that. Do we want, sorry, do we want to start with Tala? Do you want to speak to that? Sorry, I don't want to volunteer.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe I'll start with like the historical language of Tatreez, and then kind of transition to my own. But yeah, so historically, as Fia said, Tatreez, is this indigenous embroidery practice. And the symbols and motifs that are used in Tatreez are directly representative of Palestinian everyday life, so land, animals, traditions. It's directly speaking the language of how Palestinian life was. And each, motif comes from a specific village or area. And so to me, I think Tatreez also like gives a legacy to a lot of these like villages and regions that have now been destroyed. So it's speaking this like historical language. The Tatreez has also been historically used as a form of resistance. So during the first Intifada, Israel had banned the use of any public symbols that represented Palestine, so the Palestinian flag. That's why the watermelon is so popular. But what a lot of people don't know about that era is also Tatreez was used as a form of resistance. So people would actually like Tatreez or stitch things into thobes for resistance. So they would stitch words like Palestine or things in Arabic, or they would use specifically the Palestinian flag colors. Um, so historically, it's been also that piece of resistance. Um, I would say for me personally, the language of Tatreez, though, is more about connecting to my ancestors and my heritage and taking this tradition that my family has always done and has done for so many years, and kind of bringing it into diaspora and bringing it to the present and keeping them alive and taking this practice, and these pieces specifically that have been lost, and kind of bringing them into the present and keeping that art and resistance alive.
That was a really amazing answer. Do we want to go to Audrey and then end with Trisha?
Hi, so I'm Audrey. Hi, my name's Audrey. I'm not Palestinian, and so my entry into Tatreez is a little bit different than the other people on the panel who typically are coming at it from a more familial, intimate, cultural relationship. So I got really into Tatreez after October 7th. I've always been somebody who really liked textile and embroidery. And I had one of my one of my peers in class, she's Palestinian. And she made a comment to me when I was embroidering one day. She goes, oh, there's a very special type of Palestinian embroidery called Tatreez. Do you know anything about it? And I go, no, I don't know anything about that. That sounds really interesting. Let me take a look. And so this was just after October 7th, and then I spend the rest of the term up until the winter researching. I don't put a needle to thread, and I don't take that needle and I take it to fabric. I wanted to do my research. I wanted to make sure that, you know, I had my T's crossed, my I's dotted, that I had at least some idea of what was going on. And the first thing that really seemed so special to me about Tatreez was that it was a language, is that you could read it, is that I thought it was so, so special that to a discerning eye, you could look at a woman and you could know exactly what village she was from. Her dress was that specific. And so the more I learned about it, the more I learned that we had more lost that ability, that you could no longer see a woman in her dress and know where she was from. And this was because of the Zionist entity, because of the inception of the Israeli state. You no longer had this regional specificity to your thobe. It now became a national thobe, where women had joined together, where they used to be separated by geography, only meeting during pilgrimages. And it was after the inception of Israel and the ghettoization and the forced expulsion of Palestinian women that they then began to congregate in refugee camps and share their patterns and share their knowledge. And a new thobe and a new language came out of that, based on the harsh conditions and the new materials that they had to work with. They no longer had the silks that they had before. They had cotton thread and cotton fabric, and they had less of it. So the silhouette of your thobe became smaller, and the language changed, where it was no longer that pride in your specific village, it was pride in your identity as Palestinian. And that supported that national liberation. And similar to what Tala was saying, or exactly what Tala was saying, it was that pride in being Palestinian, and it was that ability to resist that erasure. Those are so beautiful and they're so colorful, as we can see, that somebody making one or somebody wearing one, it's very hard to ignore its beauty, its eye-capturingness. And so that progression in what the piece means and what it looks like and how it's understood seemed the very important message that the piece is bringing to the world.
Thank you so much for that, Audrey. Trisha, if you want to finish us out for this question?
Sure, yeah. I too am not Palestinian, so I'm a guest in the world of Palestinian Tatreez, and so I just try to approach it from a learning perspective, I guess, same as Audrey. I guess right after October 7th, I've been cross-stitching since I was like 10, and I started connecting with Palestinian artists, Tatreez artists on social media, and that it was just, I loved seeing the art and learning about the history of the motifs. I took an intro to Tatreez class from Hala Saleh Tatreez, that's her Instagram handle, and I learned even the colors of the thread would show you what areas they were from, and I thought that was just beautiful and fascinating. And so I tried to really approach it just celebrating it, and I don't really know. I use a lot of my art for mutual aid fundraising, and I feel like that's I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm flustered. So I just love it. I love learning about it, and I love seeing all the motifs online, and yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Trisha. Okay. Do you want to, let's go the opposite direction for question number 2. So starting with Trisha, then going to Audrey and then Tala. So something that has been a byproduct of industrialization everywhere has been the cheating of textiles and the change of the labor relation that women have specifically with textiles. And we see that with Tatreez, like any other art or any other textile art specifically, that there are, you know, cheap versions that you can find. And there are also versions that happen in labor conditions that are less than ideal. Women in refugee camps that are not stitching for themselves or for the protection of their traditions, but to survive. And their stitching has become a commodity. And that has impacted the tradition. So I'm wondering, us in, you know, in the diaspora on Turtle Island, how do we, you know, contend with the commodification of tattoos, how it has been presented to, you know, the market, and how can we encourage others to, you know, keep a good eye out for ethical tattoos? Who wants to?
Okay. That's a good question. I've never thought about that. I guess one thing is always, if you see something that is handmade and it's a high price, it's worth that price because it's been created by hand with love. And I feel like you should never haggle with especially with Palestinian created items. They put so much work into those. And then I don't know. What, I'm sorry. What else was the question? Sorry.
Can we help others make sure that when we're engaging in like buying tattoos, when we are supporting, you know, artists, what are the things to look out for to make sure that we are ethically engaging in that?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Maybe we could defer to someone else for that. Sorry.
Good, thank you so much. Audrey, you wanna?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. I think about the ethics of these a lot, from my position of approaching it. And so I personally, I don't buy a lot of these, but I would always say that you want to look at the site that you're buying it from. If you're not buying it directly from a person, making sure that they have the names and like a little blurb about the woman or the people that have stitched it. A lot of the exploitation happens from Israeli business owners or Western business owners that will set up these different embroidery shops nearby refugee camps or within refugee camps themselves. And some of them are truly to support the women and to give them a place to bring in to use their craft as well as support their families. But a lot of the structures have it that you have Israeli or Western women who are the business owners and are taking in the majority of the profit. And they will then dictate the design, the colors. They go, okay, here, stitch this, and then they sell it, profit from it. So going directly to Palestinian artists, Palestinian retailers, they will always be happy to tell you about their artists. So if you don't see on a site them talking about the people who stitched it themselves, I would market that as a red flag. But also on like more positive notes, similar to what Trisha does, I also stitch things for mutual aid, and I find that that's a good use of, you know, a commercialized product in Tatreez, where I speak with many different artists across the US and internationally who do many similar things. Either they're teaching digitizing classes, and either they're Palestinian and that goes to support them in their livelihood, or they're both Palestinian and they use the money that they bring in through the classes they teach or the products they sell to donate directly to Gazan families or their relatives.
Thank you so much. Paula, do you want to finish this question for us?
Yeah. Yeah, when you were asking the question, I was thinking about how, like, after the genocide began, how it's this like fine line between so many people like learning more about Palestine and seeing more about Tatreez, which is great, and that's what we want, is awareness and people to understand but there's also, like you said, there's been this commodification where it's like people have been selling things and like selling fake kafiyas or yeah, there's been a lot of that too. So it's like such a fine line between like, yes, I want people to know about this, and also yeah, like, you know, consuming as ethically as we can. Um I also, similar to both of you, I'm doing actually a raffle right now for mutual aid for my family's friend in Gaza. So a little pitch if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, it's at Tatreez with Tala. And you can join the raffle, and I'm doing a customized photo Tatreez for whoever wins. Um, but yeah, I think, you know, being really conscious of when you're buying tattoos, making sure it is made from a Palestinian, and if it's not made from a Palestinian, ideally it would be something like mutual aid. Um, you know, like this is a Palestinian tradition, this is a really indigenous practice, and it comes from our community and should be helping our community and profiting our community specifically.
Thank you so much. That was an awesome answer. And we will have all of the Instagram accounts and fundraisers available at the end if you guys want those, that information. So yeah, last question, for the artists at least. Just kind of jumping off of what we were talking about, the ethics of consuming. I'd also like to get your guys' opinions both on the ethics of learning and teaching and preserving. And our position as guardians of like a cultural practice, especially Tala and those of us that are Palestinian and participating in this practice. So I'm wondering what are the opinions on how we can protect our traditions and how we can preserve them under an ongoing genocide and cultural erasure that is not only been happening for 77 years, but has also escalated in the last 20 months, and how we can try to contend with lost traditions like Palestinian deck and things that we no longer really have access to. And does anyone want to start on that, just since it's our last question, or? Okay, we can start with Paula again.
Sure. Um, yeah. Well, okay, to get to the first part of your question, to me, Tatreez is a practice that's rooted in community, right? Like historically, women would Tatreez or stitch in circles together. Like it was very rarely an isolated practice. Um, and so I am very pro Tatreez being done communally. I run Tatreez circles out here in California, and we all gather and stitch together. And it's both Palestinians and non-Palestinians who come together and, you know, can just be together and do this creative practice and uphold Palestinian tradition together. I don't think it has to be specifically only Palestinians who do that together, as long as there is, you know, an acknowledgement and uplifting of the fact that this is a Palestinian tradition, and by stitching and by putting in these threads, you know, you are continuing the Palestinian tradition, and you can share that with other people. And if you're sharing your work and your art, you know, you're going to uplift Palestine in that moment. And to me, that's a beautiful way to keep Tatreez alive, to keep Palestine alive, and to keep that form of resistance going. For me specifically, I'll point out this piece behind me. It was actually my aunt's piece from Ramallah. When she was displaced, she brought it over, but it had only been like half done. And so there was just a lot of like trauma and hurt. And, you know, when she came here, she never really picked it up again. And so when I got into Tatreez, I started connecting with my khaltos and my aunts and everything in this deeper way. And they were able to give me some of their pieces, and I would finish those pieces for them. So I'm thinking back to what Michelle said in the beginning of how like we will never forget and like the younger people don't forget. And to me, Tatreez is such a beautiful testament of how like we really aren't forgetting. We're taking like the things from the past generations and bringing them forward. And Tatreez is not something that you're ever going to throw away, right? Like this is gorgeous. I'm not like this is going to live on for generations. So yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Thank you so much, Stella. Okay, Audrey, and then your pass. Okay, Trisha, do you wanna answer this one or?
Yeah, if you could repeat the question for me, please.
Yeah,
Thank
just
you.
how can we ethically engage with both learning and preservation, especially with an ongoing genocide
Mhm.
and cultural erasure? How do we contend with lost traditions as well as making sure that the trees doesn't become one of those lost traditions?
I guess for me, as a non-Palestinian approaching it to approach it ethically, I really focus on not appropriating. So when I make pieces to sell for mutual aid, I never use Palestinian motifs. If I use Palestinian motifs, those are pieces of art to celebrate in my home or to gift to Palestinian friends. So I guess that's how I try to ethically approach it. And then I really try to support Palestinian artists that I know on social media by amplifying their projects, their voices, sharing their art, and then taking classes from them. Um, and then if I have friends that I've had friends ask me to teach them how to do Tatreez, and I always refer them to Palestinian women that I know that teach it. And so I guess that's what I try to do.
Thank you guys so much. We're gonna move into a quick Q&A section. If there are any questions for the artists or Michelle, please feel free to raise your hand and maybe we can bring the mic to them or should we have people come up?
Small enough that we'll have something just.
Yeah, are there any questions for the panel? I want to thank you all very much for all of this. This is amazing. I'm actually second generation Palestinian American, and my grandmother was a master Tatreez artist. Is actually in one of the books I didn't even know over there. And I wanted to make sure I get connected with whoever's doing this and or get started going on a circle. And also when we talk about preservation, I just wanted to mention that a cousin of my aunt has the largest collection of thobes outside of Palestine in Jordan and started collecting them a couple of decades ago, realizing that they were getting lost with, forced, migration and everything that was happening. So if you have something, I can find a link to something, you can post it, yeah, you can share it. So sorry, it wasn't really a question, but to just weigh in and make sure I get connected with anybody that would be interested because ironically, I didn't get to be raised by my Palestinian grandmother, but my adopted grandmother did teach me embroidery and cross stitch, not Palestinian. She was British American, but I still got that love and a little bit of foundation. So I'd love to get connected. And my mom, who's also American, is willing to make me a thobe that I could sew. So we'll see where that goes. Thank you all so much for your support. Yeah, that's one of the best things about Tatreez is how communal it is and how like it is definitely made to build relationships. So yeah, we need to get that going. Any other questions or?
Hi, thanks for putting on this panel. It's some really great information. It's a fascinating form of art. I'm just wondering if you can, maybe give us a couple of fun facts or a rundown about some of the pieces that are in the room.
My question was very similar because I got to be a part of setting up the exhibit. So I got to see some of the motifs, and I would love to have you share with the group some of the cool motifs, including the chicken, namely, but also the other ones.
Yeah.
Oh, and the rest.
Oh, yeah. If there are no other questions, yeah, we were gonna move into a little deep dive on some of the stuff that we have around the room. Everyone good on that? Yeah, okay. Oh, wait, we got another question. Okay, see, I knew there was more.
I would have to go track some down. I know that there's some shorter videos. They're in Arabic though, so if that's something that you speak, that's incredible. Great, I have resources for you. There's not a lot of video content that I've been able to find and I've been aware of. But there's much more reading material available.
Anybody on the Zoom have resources on that?
On like motifs.
Oh, on video format, information on Tatreez, like documentaries. Yeah,
Oh,
they're all kind of books, huh? Like, yeah.
there's one really great documentary. Let me Googling the name of it. Yeah, it's called Stitching Palestine. It was made in 2017. It's a really beautiful documentary about 12 Palestinian women who are discussing their lives, and then there's like a backdrop of stitching throughout it. It's less like necessarily instructional about Tatreez, but more just about how Tatreez is a part of their lives and also what their lives are like in Palestine, because you know that's you can't separate the two. But yeah, great documentary.
Other video format suggestions from the Zoom? Yeah, if there are any other questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. Yeah, okay.
Name Michael and Michelle.
Michelle.
Michelle, I watched a video called Occupation 101, and it was basically, it was Noam Chomsky, and he said the reason that we're there, and the reason the United States will never leave is because of the geopolitical position that Israel is at. And I mean, I can't believe the levels of cruelty that are going on right now. And I'd like to see, you know, something change, but it just seems like we're so wedded. I don't know, what would you say? It's just really hard because I think the United States, just because where Israel is located, is part of the situation. It's much like Afghanistan.
Did you hear?
You're muted.
Hear you.
Yes, sorry, I wasn't able to unmute myself. Could someone repeat the question for me because I couldn't hear it very well?
I saw a video, it's called Occupation 101, and one of the people who interviewed was Noam Chomsky. And Noam Chomsky said, you know, the reason we're there, and I wonder if this is like a way, if we could ever change it, is the geopolitical position of Israel, where it's located in terms of the map, kind of like Afghanistan. Is there something we can do? I mean, this seems like everything's so stuck, and I'm just really frustrated. I'm sure you're way more frustrated than me, but.
Let me see if I understood the question pretty well. You heard something on Occupation 101 that Noam Chomsky said about Palestine or now, which is called Israel, in relationship to the map.
Yes.
I mean, the way I see it is that it's Palestine. That's what it is, all of it. It's Palestine, and it's been colonized from the river to the sea, and it's part of the colonization of not just the Middle East, but also Africa and the Americans. And with regard to Palestine, the Palestinians since the beginning have been struggling to bring back the name of the map on the map as Palestine. So, and when we do that, it's not against anyone. It's basically to remedy a situation that has been wrong since 1948, when Palestine was taken off the map and Israel was instead put in the map, where not just about the land and location, but also, as everybody was talking about, Israel wants to usurp the culture, wants to usurp the traditions, because they don't belong to the map, they don't belong to the land. And I can say one thing that proves this: without the history, without everything, anyone who belongs to a place would not destroy that place in that sense. That's why they destroy and we rebuild. And that anybody who belongs to the land would not cut the trees, burn the trees. You know, they cut the trees, they transplant, not transplant, they take off the trees and we plant again. You know, so that enough, without the history, without anything to learn, should be enough to tell you that the Palestinians, that Palestine belongs to the Palestinian, and the location and everything else is just a little detail that could be remedied as soon as Palestine is liberated. So yes, the truth right now, the situation right now, is that every country in the world has a place on the map, except Palestine. It has a location in our hearts as Palestinians. And that's why we need to match that. We need to bring that map from our hearts and put it where it should be on the map for the whole world to see this is Palestine. I don't know if I answered your question, but I tried to go all over the map to make sure one of it would hit the question.
Thank you. That was a lovely answer. If we're good on questions, we're gonna move on to, talking about some of the beautiful thobes that we have around the room. So I'm gonna pass the microphone off to Audrey Williams.
Thank you guys all for your questions. I was very, very excited to be able to do the identification for the different thobes and embroidered pieces that we have here today. Some of them have actually, all of them have come to us in a very special way. Some through our wonderful community members and some through the magic of thrifting, if you guys will believe it or not. So we're first going to start by talking about this wonderful purple thobe that we have in front of us. And so this is part of the Believe It or Not collection. This was thrifted here in Eugene. And so this is known as the thobe hermezot. And so that is the purple silk that you're looking at. It is a special Syrian silk, and this exact cut of dress is from the 1930s, specifically 1935, from Deir Tarif in the Al-Ramla district of Palestine. And so in some of the books that we have off to the side, you can see other versions of this thobe. And so we can tell where it's from because of this beautiful purple fabric, which was new to the market in the 1930s due to the building of the railroads, which brought the Syrian silk fabrics to remote villages in Palestine. Women in Deir Tarif and the surrounding villages are known for their creativity, as they took full advantage of the new materials that were available to them. This watered silk taffeta, known as hermezot, began to replace the traditional linen fabric used to make thobes. This change in fabric also prompted a change in the embroidery techniques. The loose weave of the linen of the older thobes facilitated the stitching of a counted cross stitch or falahi stitch. Thea talked about that earlier. So falahi means village woman. And so it is the village woman's stitch, because there were different embroidery practices depending on your social class, and where you lived. So women in the cities didn't do all that much embroidery, whereas the village women, the falahi, their cross stitch was their specialty. They did amazing at it. And so this new silk fabric, it cannot be counted in the same way that you could count the fabric for the cross stitch. And so for this fabric, women learned rashik, or a couching embroidery from the master embroiderers in Bethlehem who specialized in this couching embroidery, which you can see on the side panel. So if you want to turn that for us. So couching is the process of taking a heavier thread and using a lighter thread to tack it down, so to speak. And so that's also what the chest panel is made of, is this layering of couched, those are the thick silk threads over this silk taffeta that has been appliqued. Applique is the fancy name for stitching fabric on top of other fabric. And so that's where you can see the green inner square with the orange or that rust colored outer square. And this was a very, very unique festive thobe. So women would not be wearing this every day. This is your special occasion. You could be married in this thobe. You would go on pilgrimages in this thobe. You would go to weddings in this thobe if it wasn't your own. And so it's very, very special.
And also you can see where it's been like altered, where fabric has been added, which is one of the things that is part of the language of thobes that isn't about reading the motifs, but reading the history and the life of the dress and the woman who wore the dress, you know, how she grew, how, like what stage of her life she would have had this dress at, and whether she, you know, had children, that type of thing. So it tells us so much.
So in the back of this though, because fabric was so expensive and textiles were such a time intensive good, you can see the triangular cuts that have been sewn back together. Those triangular cuts are from the making of the sleeve that then this woman sewed back together to make into a rectangle to fill out that stretch of back on the top. So it's very cool with all of these handmade items, is that it's the story of the woman who made it. And you can see that and you can feel that in every single stitch. And okay, so now we're going to talk about the next one, which is, this is a different way that all of these pieces have come to us. These have come to us from our wonderful community members. And so if you want to take off the coats, we can show the blouse and the skirt underneath, which comes from our wonderful community member, Nora. Want to give a little wave. Round of applause. So Shia was out and about in the town, chatting up other people, and ran into wonderful Nora, who shared that she was in Sinai in the 80s and collected this beautiful skirt and blouse combination. And so these are both cotton fabric with a cotton embroidery thread. And so this style was very popular down in Sinai, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Negev Desert. They favored a dark black fabric to stand out against the sun and the sand, as well as to protect from the harshness of the climate. They're known for their beautiful assortment of colors. So how I think it was Tricia was talking about how you could identify women's thobes from the colors that they use. And that's similar, how we can tell from this region is because they love to use a bunch of different colors amongst the reds. Whereas say in Ramallah, they liked a really bright, like a scarlet red. Whereas in Al Khalil or Hebron, they liked a brick red. And so down in the Negev, they love to use a bunch of bright colors in amongst their reds. And now we also, from another community member, she brought to us this lovely jacket, which has been salvaged and made up of the back panel of an older thobe. What Tala was saying, how you're just not going to throw out Tatreez. So these heavily embroidered sections, which are known as talis, or like dents, they were cut out once the dress itself wore out, the fabric part of it. You would take those heavily embroidered sections and you would make it into something new. And so you can see the stripes that come up from what is the back panel. If you want to squish around the skirt, if you guys can see down to the bottom, it's a very similar construction with those panels, those strips of embroidery coming from the top. So how this jacket has been made is is that they had salvaged the back panel from an older thobe and they created it into this jacket, which was very much so the style across Palestine, were these short sleeve jackets to pull through the arms of the thobes so that the sleeves of your jacket wouldn't get in the way while you worked. And so the patterns that are on the jacket are also from the Negev, and they have those bright pops of color, although it's older than the skirt and the blouse. That's why it's more faded and more muted, but once they would have been just as bright. And so that would be a full outfit. Okay, and we'll wrap it up by talking about these two thobes. I don't know if everybody in the back can see, but we're gonna start with talking about this white and blue thobe. And so the chest panel from this is a contemporary recreation of a thobe or a dress from Ramallah. And so we can tell that because of the silhouette of the chest panel. Like how I was saying earlier, before the Israeli state was created, you would be able to tell where a woman was from the composition of her thobe. And that's how we can tell with this thobe. And so Ramallah is known for having that arch or that chevron shape down at the bottom and having two pendants on either side. In this case, it's a cherry motif, which is not a native motif to Palestine. And so around the 1920s, DMC, which is a French embroidery company, they started shipping their embroidery threads to Palestine. And in the boxes of embroidery thread, they would have pattern books, little pattern books. And so the cherries were one of those patterns. There are also some flowers or some moon designs that come into popularity in the 20s and 30s that are not native to Palestine, but were used by Palestinian women and were often given a new name than what was ever in the book to match their surroundings. And that, though, is another one of those, believe it or not, that was thrifted here in Eugene via magic or via incredible luck. And she, on the same day, thrifted both this purple thobe and that white thobe.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we were wondering.
We were wondering if it was because somebody had passed away, but we talked to the owner of the vintage place. And no, these pieces were sold to her by a woman who was very much alive, who had a little bit of a cultish background, but was in this slightly cultish group that was traveling the world. And at a certain point, they had visited the Holy Land and acquired some items while they were there. So this is actually the story of a lot of different Palestinian items before they make it back into Palestinian hands. Is that they were bought by people from the West, some with good intentions, others without them. And we're just happy that they are in the hands of better caretakers now.
Okay, last one that we'll talk about.
Yay, so this last one is Ia's first thobe. It is a velvet thobe from the West Bank. And this would be an example of a national thobe. So this composition you would not have seen before the inception of the Israeli state, of the Zionist entity, because, and we can tell that because of the curvilinear floral designs. A fancy term for flowers that curve and are less geometric. And so this was something that we would see. This doesn't have the bands up the skirt like we would see in this dress from the Negev. And typically, after the inception of the Zionist entity, you're going to see varying sizes in those bands of embroidery going up the skirt, and those would change in size depending on the financial situation of that woman. So you could increase those bands, you can make them wider when you had a little bit more money to buy more thread. Or this one, it just has a stitched panel on the back. And so she stitched what she could. She stitched this gorgeous chest panel that has grapevines, which means it could be from Al Khalil or Hebron, which is in the West Bank, because they are known for their grapevine motifs, as well as, I think, their peacocks on the sleeves. I know that we got a question about chickens earlier.
I thought they were pigeons is what I thought.
Okay, they could be pigeons, they could be doves, it's the same word, so they could be pigeons. Peacocks are also a common motif, as well as ostriches also occurred, because ostriches are native to Syria, or they've come extinct. Sorry, Jamie. And so we got a question about breast pockets as well as pockets for breastfeeding. And so this is, it could also get into the realm of fun facts. So women would stitch a chest pocket. So a lot of how these dresses were constructed is they would stitch that chest panel independently of the dress. So you would carry around, and that way you only had to buy a smaller size piece of fabric at a time. You don't have to save up for all of the money for all of the fabric of the thobe. So you could carry around, say you're stitching your chest panel at a time, that's only about this big in your fabric. And once you had the money to buy the rest of the fabric for the thobe, you would then you would stitch that already stitched panel, and you put them all together to create your final thobe. And in that, women would make this pocket that they would hide behind the chest panel between the fabric of their dress and the stitched panel. They would create a little pocket. And so I know women would keep their embroidery in there. There's a book of stories of women, and so there's a woman in there who would always have her embroidery in her pocket and take it out at any moment's notice, any downtime, easy grab right there. She keeps some of her valuables in there, keys in there. And we got a question about the breastfeeding pocket. And so on the sides of chest panels, like how Thea said, your dress grows with you. And so when a woman was breastfeeding, she would cut and hem 2 slits on either side of her chest panel so that she could still wear her thobe in that new stage of her life and have easier access for breastfeeding, which then she would sew up later should she no longer need them. That's super interesting. In case anybody didn't hear, our friend in the back said that in the Middle Ages, they also had breastfeeding pockets, which could just have been for wet nurses or for any breastfeeding mother, which is always something I think is super interesting, how textile history crosses boundaries and shows how women from, across the world have shared in their own knowledge and their textile making. And so I'll share my quick fun fact about chickens to answer the chicken question. And so you will see a lot of dresses that have, especially older dresses, so before the inception of the Zionist entity, you will see a lot of dresses that have chickens on them. And this is one of the first little fun facts that I learned, and I learned it from one of the books that's sitting over there, A Treasury of Stitches. And it's because Palestinian women would keep chickens, and they would get to profit from the eggs. So they would take their eggs and they would sell them at market. And with the money that they made, they would buy their fabric and they buy their thread. They buy thread for their daughter to teach their daughter. And the reason why women were allowed to keep chickens, rear them, and keep the money that they made is because men thought chickens were weak birds. And so because chickens were weak and women were weak, they, that was a good match right there. And so women were able to raise chickens and gain a modicum of financial independence or their own spending money. And so that's why women very affectionately will embroider chickens onto their dresses.
Close out there. Thank you everyone so much for coming. If you want to see any of the items that we talked about or showed today, you can visit the exhibit at any point for the next month, and it'll be on the second floor, all displayed. And Also, feel free to look around the room. I will be putting things away though. So thank you guys so much for coming. Also, eat all the desserts and make sure to follow UO Hunger Strike now for like the next hopeful larger update from our community as far as organizing. Okay, sorry. Okay. And we'll be writing a Tell Us fundraiser as well, if you are interested in that. Thanks.
Thank you. I wanted to just say one last thing. I wanted to speak to the topic of hope and hopelessness, just for a second. Do not, under any circumstances, lose hope. Palestinians are not losing hope. We don't have the luxury of losing hope either. We must continue to elevate Palestine. We must continue to speak about Palestine, whether it's Tatreez, poetry, take out a book from the library, speak about it with your friends, connect with people in Gaza, families in Gaza who are having fundraisers for their life. Please connect with Palestinians in Gaza, in town. My hope, our hope here today is that this inspires you to activate and move forward and move closer to a liberated Palestine. Thanks, y'all.